good lighting and everything, good exposure?
Yep.
Great.
Okay,
All
we're here with Professor Paul Fishwick today, and to discuss this subject of public art.
Yeah.
If you would, Prof, could you just introduce yourself and what your position is here
Sure.
at ATEC?
Sure. So I'm Paul Fishwick. I'm professor of ATEC, but also computer science. And my office is within ATEC. And I spent most of my career at University of Florida. Joined about 4 years ago, ATEC. So should I just say something about what I like doing, or that's the next thing? So I'm
Totally up to you.
Yeah, I'm interested in modeling. That's probably my obsession. And by modeling, I mean the creation of one thing to represent another. So it's modeling is sort of wide open. It's what we did as kids. You took toy trucks and planes and went, gosh, what if this were real? But it's also, there's lots of other kinds of modeling, and it's sort of a way of cross-cutting disciplines, which is why I like it. It's a way of seeing how humanities and computer science and engineering and arts can connect together.
So obviously, in any field, even public art, modeling is used.
Yeah.
Do you have any background or interest in public art other than just appreciating it?
I'd say the interest I have is professional, but I'm not an artist. I did have a project recently, and we used the Jim Love's Red Jack, the Love Jack, which is in the courtyard. It's an example of public art, right? So that the idea there was, I had a class, and I wanted to get the students and their backgrounds and say, why don't you basically write up the way you would interpret the Red Jack? And I gave the students a set of questions, and they used that as guidelines. So for example, someone who is interested in programming can create a program to reproduce the Red Jack. And we had a couple of computer science students who did that, and we had a designer who, a graphic designer, Kelly Park. I don't know, you may know her. Yeah, you know her. So Kelly, she was interested in graphic design, right? And so she drew up graphic design logos and branding for the Red Jack. The Red Jack is a sort of branding vehicle for the university.
Cool.
Yeah, so she did that. We had an artist, and Amanda Martyr, who works in, of course, Andrew's lab, and she's very interested in lots of materials and metalsmithing. So she did some prototype models of the Red Jack, and we included this all in a web page, which is online. So that's an example of
do you have that URL?
Yeah.
We'll
the URL.
It.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's okay. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I can.
We'll find it.
I can provide it to you separately. Right. So I'm interested in art as a potential vehicle for exploring different ways of looking at the world. So, taking Jim Love's Jack, right, that large sculpture, what are the different ways of looking at it? And I think we come at it based on our interests and backgrounds and hobbies. You know, for me, it would be probably more mathematical modeling or geometry modeling of the Jack, and modeling of the process used to create it, or the process that could be used to create a simulated version, because I'm interested in that kind of modeling. But I think collecting different views on sculptures, these things it provides a way to sort of learn about. It's a new kind of informal way of learning, potentially, right? Because you go out into the world, you find a piece of public art, and perhaps in the future people might say, what do you want to learn? Chemistry, computer science, art history, and through these artworks you can sort of learn any subject, assuming somebody's generated the content.
So actually using a piece of public art as a vehicle for learning.
Absolutely.
For education.
Absolutely. So that would be, I think in a broad way, that would be my interest in public art. Public art as a catalyst or a vehicle for learning.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah, well, that's, I
Great
mean, it's
point.
interesting. Now, clearly, again, learning what? Well, we each have a different perspective on that, but I think the more learning that can go on of different sorts, the better. So, I provide my own interest and perspective, and others, as in the class experiment with the jack, they would provide theirs.
So, Prof, you mentioned that you're an you do Pokemon Go.
I do Pokemon Go,
And
yeah.
we've seen that that's been used as a vehicle to actually, in social media, to pitch, to brand
Yes,
public art.
it has been.
Do you have any views as a technologist?
Yes,
about that?
yes, I do. I mean, the technology that we used connected with the class is we use Bluetooth beacon technology. For example, here's a good example of a beacon, right? Bluetooth beacon, and we put this actually underneath the jack, and then when it was, this broadcast the URL, which then would point you to that page with all the different ways of looking at the jack. The graphic design way, the geometry way, and all that kind of stuff. So, as a technology, Bluetooth is one way, global positioning system, GPS, is another. As it turns out, there's a host of technologies for basically creating something. So you get an idea of what's the person's looking at. People use magnetism. People use take a photograph of something and of the artwork, and it recognizes the image because it's done machine learning. Some machine learning is going on in the background. So technology, from a technology's perspective, I'd say there's a lot of different things we looked at when we were doing the Red Jack, and the beacon is probably the cheapest technology. Global positioning system. The problem with GPS is it's unless you got military clearance, resolution is extremely low. It's not very good. And if you're indoors, unless you're near a window, the GPS is generally not a particularly reliable technology.
So that more localized, like Bluetooth and near field, is, you see that is
near field would be excellent. Only thing with near field is that for NFC is that you don't have that on iPhones because you can't get to it because they use Apple. They use that for Apple Pay. So Apple said we're locking you out of that. You can't get to that code to use near field. So Bluetooth is probably the cheapest, best way for doing indoor. You had a question.
But the Bluetooth has a distance constraint, right?
Bluetooth has a distance constraint, and it's not ideal. The more you can do some triangulation if you've gotten more than one beacon advertising. And yeah, Bluetooth has got its own issues. Every technology's got a bunch of issues, but there's no perfect example. One of the things I like, in which many museums have used all kinds of things, but a number. You attach a number, and it says enter 27, and that co-locates the viewer of the art with the information to the server. Basically knows what the viewer is looking at. So the technology parts of this are very complex and detailed, and I don't pretend to know all of them, but we did look at quite a few when we were exploring this. Yes, they all have issues, and I don't think there's any one best one. The Bluetooth beacons I know are getting very cheap. The price is nice. The price is very, very nice. China, of course, produces a lot of, regardless of whose name goes on it, they do a lot of the production for the Bluetooth technology. I bought some things from Alibaba in China, tried them out. We've just tried a lot of, we have a playground, as it were, for electronic devices and in the lab, and we tried a bunch of different things. Anyway, so yeah, technology, lots of potential, but ultimately the problem comes down to what is the viewer looking at? Seems like a simple problem. Not easy, but sometimes the cheapest technology, like putting a number on the thing or a QR code, sometimes that's the cheapest and that's the best,
Yeah. one of the draws, I think, of just digital technology and social media has been this ability to create ad hoc conversation, collective conversation.
Yes, yes.
Do you think that would, we've so focused on the individual experience
Yes.
of public art to the individual, or even from a learning perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, learning is both individual and collective,
Right.
but the learning and the conversation kind of go hand in hand. Pokemon Go, one of the effects has been that creating collective conversations, really, connectivity.
Well, the only thing, so getting back to Pokemon Go, there are several critiques of that. One is, of course, because it's a closed technology, it's a closed source platform, and the way they got the names for the public art. Because I go running or I go walking in this place called Austin Ranch, which is near where I live.
Tell us about that.
The Austin Ranch has lots of public art. So the community was constructed, and I would say Austin Ranch is in Plano, okay? And it's
Beautiful.
big, huge condos, apartments. There's probably a piece of public art every 100 meters or something like that. I mean, there's a ton of it there. But if you play Pokemon, so if I get my cell phone out and I play Pokemon and I go there, I don't often know the artist's name, number one. The title is the title that was used in the game prior to Pokemon, which is where all the names for these objects came from. And the name's escaping me for that. Do you remember?
Because the Pokemon's concept,
Right.
not just the
Right.
public
Absolutely.
art. They encourage people to hang out, to take a walk.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Pokemon, so getting to Pokemon, I think that's a very good thing. So if we're talking about Pokemon and the idea of taking a walk and bumping into public art they otherwise wouldn't have known, I think Pokemon achieves that. So the question is, where can we go from Pokemon, right? And sort of what, who would be interested in that? And that's where, creating apps, which is something we did, and I've got an app that runs, and we use, I forget, Cordova, which is a multi-platform technology. So Cordova does, you can then output Cordova code to Android and iOS devices. Otherwise, you're writing platform-specific code.
Yeah,
But-
and that's a great point about closed platforms.
Right.
Being a fan of both of those smartphone platforms.
Yeah.
But they have their constraints.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
maybe the competition will open both of them up to the open source world. Let's hope.
Well, let's hope. And I think the question is, you should note that there has been an app for the art that is on the wall, adorning the walls of ATEC, the Davidow collection. So an app was created by Dylan Oregon, who built on a previous student's work from a couple years ago. And that app, Cassini knows well about the app because he's actually guided Dylan, who's now graduated, to create the app. And so that app used Bluetooth rather than GPS, but the idea is the same. It tells people about all the artwork inside the ATEC building. So you can think of that as a sort of a counterpart to the... And the other thing is that there has been some interesting work in outdoor sculpture gardens in terms of traces for people who say, this is interesting, or what is it, stuff like that. So there was a project where the public would go out into a sculpture garden and they would leave these voice traces. And what happens is when visitors go out and into the same garden, they can hear these other people and what they thought when they were at that relative position with respect to the artwork. So some of that has gone on, some of that kind of technology and that capability has happened. I mean, it's not a new thing, but it's probably still worth doing some more exploration. The question is, what do you want to say about it, and who gets to say? Who gets to? I think it's somewhat of a political, social thing. Who gets to interpret the art?
Yeah.
This is a big question in my mind.
What is the viewer looking at?
Yeah.
What is the viewer looking at? But who gets
The authorship.
who's the author,
Yeah.
right? Who gets to say something about the artwork? Everyone that sees the art may see something very different. And I certainly would applaud the idea, the sort of democratic approach to have as many voices as possible. Obviously, then you run into all the issues of fact-checking and the things that have been in the news over the last few months about, is this an alternative fact or a real fact? But at the very least, making that the democratic voice possible, I think, is interesting. It's not something typically you'll get in a museum. Museum controls the access to the artwork and how it's interpreted. However, having said that, the museum also has usually opens up possibilities for other interpretations with other guides that come into museums. I know the Met in New York has done that routinely. They have guided tours. People who don't work for the museum, but who come in and have these different tours of the artwork.
And the technology now is literally giving us virtual tours
It is.
of museums
It is,
online.
meaning that you don't need to go there, which of course is a problem for museums because they want you to go there, right?
Sure. And it begs the tension between physicality and virtuality.
Yeah. That's always an issue.
Yeah.
And the social media help us to share their experience more easily, right?
Right, absolutely. So I think all of this can work itself out. I think museums in general, have been struggling to, I think worldwide, but especially in the U.S., have always been struggling to find new ways to improve visitation and exposure of what they do. So, people like Rick and Bonnie are the experts in all things museums, but that's sort of my understanding of that.
Great point. Is there any other wild card?
Oh, the last
you'd
thing.
like to pontificate again?
Yeah.
Or four?
Or four. I would say four. I think the project that you talk about is really worthwhile, and I believe that the public art can be a way to engage people to learn across the spectrum. So I just sort of close with what I started with and say there's a lot of potential, but it's not currently unrealized, either because people aren't noticing that they're seeing it, but they're not observing, which is, I guess, a Sherlock's Holmes, sort of thing. You see it, but you're not really paying attention to it. It's almost as if it were invisible, or you're getting a very limited view of that work. So, can we get more views, either from the visitors or domain experts or whatever?
Can we deepen the experience?
Absolutely. Can we deepen the experience? Yeah.
Wow. So I got to ask one last thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Corollary, but I saw the vision just today,
Okay.
from a different context, that put out the possibility that in 5 years, mobile handheld devices would be gone, replaced by virtual reality, that same information projected through some kind of
Lens or something.
device.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on that? Love to hear.
Gosh, I wish I knew more about some of that technology, like the retinal. There are ways in which to project directly on the retina, and I don't know much about that. But in theory, it sounds like an amazing possibility. In terms of just devices on augmented reality, it seems to me there's going to be a price point and a convenience point where the it looks like this,
Yeah.
because currently it looks like a gigantic helmet, right? No, nobody cares about that, right? This is where we are now, and we're all excited about the helmets.
But it's
we
a
need
put
to
off socially that was pushed back even against Google Glass.
Yeah,
of,
that's true.
Even
Google Glass had its issues, and it did look a bit like this, right? Google Glass.
Yeah.
But I think the technology will improve, and right, probably this thing will may go away. Absolutely. So we're not there yet, but there's no reason why we couldn't be getting the same information through either retinal projection or just something on a pair of lenses.
Well, Prof, thank you so much. That was
thanks.
Incredible.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Got anything else you want to ask Professor Fishwick?
No.
Wait.
Professor gave me very much inspiration.
Excellent.
Good, excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
I appreciate it. I hope your project
appreciate
goes well. It's a good project.